we here? I think we're here. Welcome to our panel, Milestones, Mishaps, and Moving Parts, Production in Practice. What are we going to be talking about today? So game projects, obviously, don't get made in a straight line. So today in this panel session, we're going to explore how the producer's role shifts between art, features, publishing, and external development, and why producers are essential to each. Our panelists are going to be comparing what their day-to-day looks like, the backgrounds that help most, how success is measured, and where the biggest challenges lie. Whether you're curious about indie projects or AAA blockbusters, get ready for an honest side-by-side look at what it really takes to keep teams and games moving forward. I'm Junie. I'm the Strategy and Business Innovation Director for External Development at Electronic Arts. Yes, that's a long title. But I think more relevantly, I am also the accidental founder and director of the Game Production Community Discord. We have a server of over 6,500 industry professionals in production, project management, and leadership disciplines looking to knowledge and experience share and possibly share Jira memes, discuss rainbow-colored spreadsheets, and exchange a lot of cat pictures. I'd like our panelists to do a quick introduction of themselves. I'm going to start at the left top of my screen, which is with Kitty.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I am Kitty, the senior producer at Blind Squirrel Games, where I have most recently been leading production efforts on Amazon Luna ports of Top Spin and Mafia. Excuse me. Over the past decade, I've had the opportunity to help build and ship a wide range of titles across multiple studios, including Worlds Untold, Counterplay Games, in Exile, and at the beginning of my career at Blind Squirrel. My experience spans everything from overseeing the teams of developers across art, design, engineering, audio, narrative, to coordinate complex outsourcing pipelines, managing certification, accessibility requirements, and guiding multidisciplinary pods on many Unreal and Unity titles. So that's pretty much me. In a nutshell, I'm excited to be here today to share my experience as a producer. Thank you for having me. I'll pass it over to Laura.
Hello, I'm Laura de Loof. I have worked for the past 7 years in an indie game publisher here in the Netherlands, where I'm based currently. And after that, I started my own indie publisher, which is not live yet, so don't look up the title Other Worlds yet. Still building the website, but we're going to do some cool stuff soon. I've released 30 titles by now, I think, both digital and physical. So that's where my experience comes from. And I'm now also helping out at the B Game Incubator, which is a video game incubator here in the Netherlands. And now I'm passing it on to Kamer.
Hi, my name is Kamer Erken. I am the vendor relations manager on the Diablo title at Blizzard Entertainment. I look across all Diablo franchises. And my background, I've been with the company for the last 3 years, looking after our vendors and growing our portfolio. Before that, I was actually at an outsourcer in audio outsourcing for the video game industry. And over there, I sat across production, business development, account management. So kind of just wearing as many hats as possible to get the job done. So that's me. I'll pass it over to Layla, last but not least.
Hi, everybody. My name is Layla Mamedova. I, until July, was the cinematic pipeline manager on ZeniMax Online's unannounced MMORPG. I actually started my career as an animator at a tiny little studio called Minnow Mountain, where I worked in television. I worked on Undone seasons 1 and 2 for Amazon Prime. And then I decided drawing for money made me sad, so I decided to become a games producer instead. I worked at a startup called Genvid. I am famous to about 30 Silent Hill fans because I was a dev streamer and producer on Silent Hill Ascension. And then I went to ZeniMax, and now I am a cinematics and art pipelines specialist on top of being a producer. So Chakrid and I are frenemies. And that's me, and I'll give it back to Junie.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to dig in. And we're going to just get right into the thick of it because we're going to start very spicy with what are the core responsibilities of a producer, which means a whole bunch of things and absolutely nothing at all. So Kitty, I'd like to go to you first. What do you think are the differences? Like, how does the role of a producer differ between, say, art, features, publishing, external?
Yep, basically we're cat herders. When you're producing for art, your world is made of many specialized disciplines. Concept artists, modelers, texture, hair artists, visual effects, UI, animation, you name it, it's everything under the umbrella of art. And it often involves multiple outsourcing partners as well. And each of these groups has its own workflows, dependencies, review cadence, and version of done. So as an art producer, you need a deep understanding of the entire art pipeline end to end. You're constantly tracking where every asset is in its journey, what needs to happen before it can move forward, and how changes actually ripple across multiple disciplines. It is very detailed, very hands-on, and often requires you to anticipate problems before they appear. In other words, you're operating at a 5,000-foot level view, close enough to see the individual trees and how they're growing. And moving on to producing for features, that shifts the perspective. It isn't just about art anymore. You're actually coordinating across design, engineering, audio, animation, QA, and sometimes external partners as well. The pipelines are still there. The work still flows from one discipline to another, but the complexity expands. A feature producer has to understand not only what needs to be built, but how every department's work fits together to make that feature actually function in game. So you're looking at the bigger picture, identifying the cross-team dependencies and making sure everyone is aligned on the same goals and timelines. So here you're actually operating at roughly 10,000-foot view, high enough to see the whole forest and how the parts actually interconnect. So the next topic is publishing and external development. That stretched the view even further up higher. While I've never done direct publishing, but from my understanding, based on my experience, you're thinking about product holistically. So the marketing beats, trailers, community messaging, ratings, certifications, store assets, you name it, it's everything. It's about launch readiness. And with external development, the challenge becomes communication, alignment, and expectation managing with teams that aren't physically in the building. So you're making sure they have what they need, that their output matches the internal quality bars, and that schedule stays synced across the studio boundaries. So as an outsourcing producer, you have to make sure your internal team has their ducks in a row. So basically, across art, features, publishing, external development, your role as a producer doesn't fundamentally change. You're still unblocking, aligning, and keeping everyone moving forward, but the altitude does. The higher you go, the broader the perspective, and the more departments you're weaving together is the more strategic decision-making process becomes.
I think that was already a pretty complete answer. Any of the other ladies want to add anything, or should we just move on?
I think it was quite complete.
In that case, moving on, Laura, why do teams need producers? What is our value add?
Yeah, speaking from the side of the publishing producer, at least, we usually have a very high-level overview of the project. It's because they can see and help guide many projects every year, because it's not just one project that you're focused on. Of course, every publisher has it a little bit different. But for example, where I used to be, it was around 6-7 titles a year that you're guiding that are actually coming out, and a lot more that are still in the pipeline. So you just have very broad perspective, and that helps you often spot risks and opportunities in your release plan or projects very early and very clearly due to that experience. So we often get developers, especially when they have their first project, who set up a schedule based only on how long that they think their task is going to take, which is super logical, but it's often also, it's just a rough estimation of what you think it's, how long it's going to take, unless you've already made a very similar game before. So yeah, after evaluating their original plan, we often see many things that are forgotten. So we help them with that, which it's just good to have a publishing producer to look at it with fresh eyes, flag some things that haven't been taken into account in your release plan. And then we'll usually also sit together with the marketing and sales team, together with the developer, to determine some real-world milestones. And those can, we can flag things that you might have forgotten or underestimated. So one thing that often gets underestimated is localization, or other things like certain plugins that need to be replaced because they don't work on console when you start porting, which is something that you can oversee if you didn't even think about porting in the beginning when you were building the game. And afterwards, we will help update your plan accordingly to everything that we found. And then after a project's actually signed, because this often happens before that point, we'll stay in close contact for the whole duration of the project to make sure that everything keeps going according to plan, that your milestones are hit, and that your release plan stays on track, which is not the easiest part usually. But yeah, that's more the publishing point of view.
Anyone on the other side want to add?
Yeah, so in development, and this is, I guess, a little bit of added context to what Kitty was saying also, but the reason an organization needs producers is because we are, despite the fact that most of our work is like kind of, I'll say soft skills, right? We're expert communicators, we're people who will relay information, like Laura was just describing, all the loose ends we can tie up, all the things we can watch out for. We are advocates, first and foremost, for our teams and for our projects. We are here to make sure our developers' time is protected. We are here to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks, that everybody is communicating, that, you know, all these little things that need taken care of on the ground are getting taken care of. And for me, as somebody who's worked in like small indie environments, startup, and then, you know, a AAA studio, I think the biggest difference in the way that advocacy work is executed is changes less with the kind of team that you're assigned to. So again, I'm a cinematic specialist and an art specialist. So I work pretty strictly and pretty deeply with art and cinematics teams. So Kitty was describing the kind of like levels of views you can have. I actually tend to hover at like a 2,500 foot view. I'm a drone more so than a pilot, you know. I get flown through the trees. I'm in there taking the Twilight beauty shots. And it's really the size and the budget of the team that changes the execution of my job, because smaller teams require a producer to wear many more hats than perhaps a larger team would. So at ZeniMax, I was pretty exclusively focused on the cinematics pipeline. Meanwhile, at GenVid, I was focused on the art pipeline, the cinematics pipeline. I was contributing voice lines. I was contributing art assets. I was outsource managing. So teams need producers kind of dependent on the size and the function of the team. You know, there's no like, that's why it's so hard to describe what a producer does. Cause it's like, yeah, you're a producer, but what kind of team are you producing for? That's, you know, take your first sip of hot chocolate for the first, it depends of the call. That's also our other function. It's just say it depends.
Because at the end of the day, it's like getting what needs to get done smoothly. Right? It's the glue that kind of holds everything together. And it just, depending on the size, it just scales, right? So at the end of the day, you're getting SHIT done. That's how I think of my life.
All right. So Layla, staying with you for a little bit more, especially given your art background, what would you say is the background knowledge that has been a boon for you in your role? What did you have to learn also to supplement your existing knowledge?
Oh, so much. So again, I come from 2D television animation. So I am a trained illustrator, and, you know, I hand draw. When I was working on Undone, it was hand drawing most of the time. And then when I was a lead, I was kind of working on a very bespoke, very custom, like performance tracking pipeline. Those hard skills that I learned, other than being like a shot grid expert, technically, I didn't really transfer over. I don't draw as a producer unless you count the diagram I drew of why my posture contributes to my chronic migraines. That was something I drew at my last gig. But the things that do transfer over are just the, like, again, it's all about the core principles. It's like, okay, what are the types of things that creatives worry about? What are the types of things that you might have to address with them? I worked with a lot of creatives who might feel a little bit insecure. I worked with a lot of creatives who maybe need very specific types of feedback. So the skills of spotting how someone needs to be spoken to and addressing like what their needs are, those are the things that transferred over. The things I had to pick up, mostly like vocabulary and pipelines. So Junie mentioned the game production community when I was transferring out of television and into games. That was a great place for me to go and ask questions. I read A Playful Production Process, the book by Richard Lamarchand, right, to pick up the vocabulary. But the thing that I noticed the most when I was reading that book and I was in GPC, like just starting out, the thing that I noticed the most is I was like, oh, a lot of the stuff I would need to do as a games producer is stuff I'm already doing as an animation lead. It just has a different texture to it. And I think if you are trying to get into production or if you are a producer, there is this tendency to get lost in the details of like, what certification do I need? What's Agile? What's Scrum? What do I need to know? The things that transfer over and the things that like the existing knowledge are all those core principles. How do you communicate? How do you see through to the core of a problem? How do you set up a process that actually benefits your developers? If you can strip away all of the kind of like techie, like dongles, ornamentation is the word I'm looking for, then you will be a better producer than if you come equipped with, 4 certifications and I don't know, years of whatever, knowing whatever software. You can learn software. You can't learn how to see a problem for what it is.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off that, like, I genuinely think it's essential to be a people person. Like, you are going to deal with so many different personalities, and you need to, like Layla said, you need to know how they like to be communicated to. And I think being adaptable, like people person and adaptable, is so important, and it's hard to teach that. And I think for me, because, I don't try and cosplay as an artist. I work with amazing artists and supervisors, but I trust their expertise, and I just try and learn as much as I can. Like Layla was saying, with like terminology. When I worked in voiceovers, I had no experience in voiceovers and audio. So I would literally just go sit with the audio designers and be like, oh, what does that do? What does that machine do? Oh, why are you looking for this? And then when I went to art, I would literally go to our like tech art director. I'd be like, can you just sit with me and like virtually, like go through what you're looking for? When you're looking at what vendors send us, like what are you looking for? What's good? What's bad? Like animation wise, what are the steps of animation? And it's like, look, I'm not an expert, but it's like, okay, I can have intelligent conversations with people to hopefully take away extra time that they need to explain something to me. But yeah.
We're not experts. What we can do is we'll ask the question, we'll document your response, and we will distribute that response to the parties that need to see it to keep you from repeating yourself 100 times.
Thank you, Layla. Yes.
I will want to add something to what Kamir said. Is a people person to some extent, yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, every team is unique and every team needs its own unique kind of producer for that reason as well. I mean, I'm personally an engineer, personally very introverted, still managed to do pretty well as a producer as well. So there are different flavors of producer in that sense that are needed across the board. Sometimes being a little bit more process or planning focused is also the kind of producer that teams need. Let's see, moving on. Kamir, actually back to you. How would you say that success is measured for your type of role?
Yeah, so this is something like I even talked about Junie with prior to this. What is a producer? I guess that's what we're trying to figure out right now. But my type of production, I sit solely within outsourcing. So I look after all of our external development. And so I was really thinking about like, how do you measure success? It's hard. A lot of times it's just about, okay, did the job get done smoothly? But then when we want to like break it down, for me, I think it's really about strategic resourcing. Because for me, a big measure of my success is going to be how well did I match the vendor to the particular need or asset. Because that is essentially like the problem we need to fix. And sometimes with very short notice. So it's a balance of, cost, quality, reliability, trust with the vendor, especially when, something unexpected happens, who can I call on that won't need hand holding? And I think if I made the right choice there, I'm doing my job well. Something else that came to mind was like operational clarity and transparency. So tracking for our team is huge. So at any given time, I need to have one of my stakeholders be able to come into a data sheet and understand, where are budgets lying, where are the headcounts lying, who are we working with, how much are they costing. So we need to know at any given time, where are we? And I like knowing that people have the tools. So if I'm not there, they can get it for themselves. Because at the end of the day, I want to lighten the load for our internal producers, our art supervisors. How much grunt work can I take away from them so they can do what they do best, and that is the art. So it's a really symbiotic relationship between me, internal production, our art supervisors, and that's where, going back, communication is key between our teams. And then I think maybe being the buffer, Layla, I think you touched on this, but sometimes being the bad guy where we have to maybe pivot or we need to give bad news, I need to be that person so the art supervisors can keep that happy, joyful relationship with everyone else. And that's okay. It's all in how you do it. And I think the last thing for me and how I measure success would be driving efficiencies. How can we make our process better for, our internal supervisors, for our vendors, because I sit in between our external vendors and our team. So what can we do better that makes process smoother, can cut down on time, which also saves us money. So yeah, for me, it's smooth execution. If they didn't even realize something was happening, it's like, perfect, I did my job. You didn't even feel any of the bumps.
In all honesty, I suspect that holds for everything that you've said, seems to hold for everyone on this call. Anything that you feel any of the others feel is missing? Anything you want to add, or should we move on? Next section. Because next section to dig into is the day-to-day workflow variations. Now, again, this is a second sip of hot chocolate. It depends. Every day gonna be different. But Laura, can you describe what your day-to-day responsibilities look like?
Yeah, again, so we have a little bit more of a high-level look at projects. And as Junie already mentioned, every day is very different. But in general, for me at least, start off by checking email and messages, and many teams also have their own preferred communication channels. So next to mail, that will also be checking Discord, Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, and a few more. Really depends on who you're working with at that moment, which teams you're working with. Then it comes to lining up all of the fires that came in, and then you prioritize them, usually somewhere on a scale from either tomorrow's release is in jeopardy or servers are down to translations for some project are delayed by a day or two. And then once they are prioritized, you deal with them. And in between, we also have our daily stand-up somewhere with the producers, like the whole producing team, both internal and external. And after all of the fires are out or mitigated, because you can't always solve everything right away, of course, we'll move on to all of the other tasks. And here you can think of things more like submitting builds for platform holder approval for console and PC. There's requesting H ratings for physical editions, weekly check-ins with our developers to help plan or discuss if we're still on track, or if we have to steer another way, maybe adjust the plan a little bit. If so, inform the management team. Also planning reports for the management team or presentations if needed. We might be discussing a demo strategy with the marketing team or a strategy for an upcoming bundle with the sales team, and so on. Can keep going for quite a while. But afterwards, we usually wrap up the day by checking with the teams that are in different time zones. So time zones that start their day when we end ours, to see if they have everything they need for the day to come. Because otherwise we get called in the middle of the night, and that's not fun for anyone.
Kitty, I'm actually curious, what does your day-to-day look like being in a bit of a different angle, not having experience on the publishing side?
Yeah, so I feel like it's always similar from publishing and the development cycle, because you're still trying to field the questions from clients, from the internal team, and making sure that everybody has their ducks in a row before you actually get the answers out to the clients, which is our publisher. So I work closely with the publishers that Laura is working with, right? So it's me trying to get the questions answered, making sure that everybody has what they need to do their best at their job internally, and then making sure that everything is lined up. The expectations from outside may not be the same inside. Just yesterday, I had a technical meeting that we were like, our publisher was like, you guys are crazy. This timeline is crazy. And we were all confused. We were like, what do you mean? Like, what do you know that we don't know? We're trying to integrate something that you already know about it. So we're all like, oh, it should be fine. So even my technical director is like, oh, it should be fine. So I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll just keep an eye on things and just making sure that we are setting the expectation, letting our publisher know that, hey, this is going well or not so well, or something is at risk. We tell them ahead of time. It's about setting expectations internally and externally.
Yeah, totally. That resonates for sure. Katie, actually staying with you, which roles and teams do you find yourself collaborating with most, and what does that look like in this kind of scenario?
Yeah, so just adding on to that a little bit more, what I was saying and what Laura is saying, I currently collaborate the most with engineers. And earlier in my career, sitting in technical meetings felt like listening to another language. But after being in countless things, reviews, troubleshooting discussions, the jargon and the system now make more sense. I can follow along fluently and ask the right questions, and even like ask technical consideration that the team haven't thought of. And like I was saying, even just yesterday at my technical meeting, my associate producer messaged me on the side asking me about a tool that they were talking about. And I just sent her back a meme with that math confusion meme back to her. I'm like, I don't know either. So, but basically, when it comes down to it, the collaboration is about translating the complexity into clear, actionable steps, and then keeping our pipelines running smoothly. And my day-to-day reflects that. Like, I stay closely connected to both our clients, our internal developers, and fielding questions, relaying updates, and constantly checking on the team health and blockers. So in practice, I'm always looking for potential blockers before they become real issues. And if someone is waiting for specs, docs, mixing files, or unclear requirements, we as producers got to make sure to step in and coordinate, clarify, and reroute those tasks so that progress never stalls. So basically, your job is to essentially remove the friction so the team can stay focused on the work itself and ensure that they do their best at their job. So across all the discipline, the pattern is consistent. As a producer, you're the connector that keeps the information flowing and identify the obstacles early, making sure the team has what they need to keep forward. And so one thing that I learned that if everybody talks to each other, producers would be out of a job. So that's what I take out of everything.
Layla, you wanted to add?
Yes, if my internet will let me. I just want to flag something that Kitty said, which is, as a producer, asking questions, being curious is kind of your best weapon. And on top of that, it's okay to say you don't know something. I did the same thing. I would sit in on engineering reviews, and then I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or again, I came from a 2D art background. I worked with a extremely technical art director who had a 20-year career, with Blizzard, and he would throw around jargons and acronyms all the time. He would go, the SSS on this isn't working. And it took me a moment, and I would sit there and I would go, SSS, oh wait, I'm a painter, subsurface scattering, and he would go, yes, and I'm like, yeah, I did it. But you have to not be afraid of asking the question. And I was trained, shout out Shaoling Lai, I was trained that part of my job is occasionally being the village idiot and being the person brave enough to ask the question.
I hear you on that. Come here, building on top of what Katie mentioned about obstacles. What do you find are the most common friction points, and how do you set out to resolve those?
Well, like Kitty was talking about, if everyone talked to each other, we'd be out of a job. I think breakdowns in communication. So for me, because I sit in between our vendors, our supervisors, legal, finance, I sit within all of them to get things done. I think one of the biggest friction points for me is when, for example, supervisors start assigning work directly to our vendors and I'm not made aware. It's something so simple, but they want things done quickly. I completely get it. There's a last minute request that comes from internal, but if I'm not looped in, then tracking falls apart, budgets fall apart, head counts aren't matching. And then I'm suddenly just chasing mystery tasks. And I'm like, wait, who gave you this and where is this going? So it's, one of the things that I try to avoid, but if it does happen, it's like, okay, let's trace the request back to the source. Why did the bypass happen? What can we do to rectify? There's always a solution. It's just finding it, right? I think as well, and maybe this is because I'm not an artist by trade, sometimes our amazing supervisors forget that we're also a business and we can get into these endless revision loops and the back and forth feedback, and the perfectionism is at an all-time high, which is amazing. But then, we can lose track of the business reality and the timeline and budgets. So sometimes having to remind, hey, we need to get this done. Do we maybe not have the right vendor for this task? Or maybe are the briefs not as detailed as they should be? Maybe there's kind of a misconnect a disconnect between the two parties. And then I would say one that I see is kind of the too many cooks in a kitchen. When you have a large organization like Blizzard, we have a lot of amazing producers, and sometimes the responsibilities blur and there's no clear jurisdiction who covers what. And then sometimes because of that, assets are missed. And then it's like, oh, wait, I thought you were handling this. And oh, I thought you were handling this. So it's knowing or establishing explicit ownership to avoid these type of mishaps. Just to know where someone's jurisdiction starts and ends, just so there's clarity for all parties involved. Those are my top three that came to mind.
And we're going to keep it spicy because this is, I know, one of Layla's favorite topics, but what is the most common fire that you're asked to put out?
You'll never believe it. It's people not talking to each other. It's people not talking to each other. Every problem that I'm constantly asked to put out on creative teams, it comes from people not talking to each other. And again, that is why producers are always on top of everybody going, please tag me, please tag me. My process as a producer starts with every single day, I log on and I read everything in Slack. I don't care if I'm tagged in it. I'm going through every single channel that I have shared with any of my cross-functional teams. I'm looking, I'm absorbing, I'm taking notes, because sometimes you don't get tagged. And the things that I get asked to put out are usually like somebody didn't talk to each other long enough that now it's a friction. Now it's an interpersonal conflict and people are mad at each other. People get, pulled into things and you start seeing things spill out into public channels. That's not good for any organization, right? So as a producer, I'm like, I talk about this all the time, in the game production community server. Basically, any question that gets asked, I'm like, well, one, it depends, but two, are people talking to each other? Because sorry, I'm literally losing my train of thought because I got so Kamir, like the things Kamir was talking about were like inherently triggering to me about the kind of problems I had to solve. So let me reset really quick. It is important to set up a workspace, right, outside of the hard pipelines and processes and the things that we document and the way that we do things. One of the most important foundational aspects of setting up a workplace is the psychological safety required to operate within it. So if people are not talking to each other, what is going to happen is people are not going to feel safe to ask questions. People are not going to feel safe to collaborate with their cross-functional partners. They're not going to feel safe to submit things for feedback or to do quick check-ins. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of friction just come from that inherently. And so when I'm starting to build my career on kind of being a fixer, which is stressful but keeps you paid, which is nice. And every time I'm flown into something, the thing I'm seeing is nobody is talking to each other. So a lot of one of the things in my production toolkit, right, we were talking about being a people person. I do agree that all producers are people. It doesn't necessarily have to manifest in being an extrovert, right? As Junie was saying, it can manifest in being introverted, but wanting to help. For me, I put on an extrovert mask between 9 to 5. And then I go nonverbal at 5:30. Between 9 and 5, I am the friendliest person on the team. I make sure I take the first couple minutes of stand-up to ask people how they are. I make sure to connect people. I participate in all the like non-work channels. And while I feel like production is a lot of ruthless prioritization and a lot of producers will abandon those things in order to like keep things moving and get stuff done, it is just part of my thing, part of my philosophy personally and my style as a producer to make time for those things. Because if I am friendly to the devs, they will come to me. Sometimes they will come to me over their team's producer. And that's not ideal, but that's something I can work with and help that other producer communicate or get something on their radar that maybe isn't. So yeah, when it comes to fires, it's, as we've been saying this entire section, it's just communication. And that's okay, right? I'm okay with that being my job, but it becomes a fire if it's left unattended.
But I do love what you're saying about also making sure that there's some sort of balance, like myself being very, very introverted, making sure that you keep an eye on your energy levels, and at some point also pulling out and being like, you know what, I have given all of the energy today and I'm good with that part for now. And then you're really also taking care of yourself, because otherwise the next day you are not going to be able to firefight as well as you otherwise potentially might have. Layla, we're actually going to stay with you a little bit longer. Having started in indie and really navigated back and forth with AAA, how would you say that, especially for taking a little bit more of a bird's eye view on the overall product lifecycle, milestones, et cetera, how do you feel that the scale of the company or the project impact your role?
I'm actually just going to take some time to connect everything all the other panelists have been saying, because we've all hit on portions of this as we've been going. Scale impacts, to go back to Kitty's metaphor, it impacts the height that you're operating at, right? There's a mix between like, if you're indie, no matter how senior you are, your plane's going to fly lower. It really doesn't matter. The project is smaller, the timeline is smaller, there's fewer people to manage. You could be a lead producer on an indie title, you're still going to be more in depth than a lead producer on a AAA title, because once you start getting into a lead producer on a AAA title or an executive producer on a AAA title, your kind of oversight of the dev responsibilities become mixed with business responsibilities, right? Mm-hmm. The bigger the team, the more budget is involved and the more niche that budget becomes, right? You're not just dealing with direct dev expenses, you might be dealing with travel expenses for business meetings, you might be dealing with on-sites, with team dinners, like PD, right? Professional development costs. Like there are all sorts of things that are draws for bigger studios that suddenly kind of falls on production depending on what's happening. You also, the size of your team will also impact the depth with which you approach something. Like I said, my scope as a producer, these wonderful ladies are broader than I am. I am narrow but deep. So it's kind of important that I stay on top of my art training as well as my production training, because I'm called in as a specialist a lot. Meanwhile, you might have somebody working in indie might have to do what Kitty does, right? Might have to do everything. Meanwhile, you probably aren't, if you're indie, you're probably not working like Khmer does with external developers, right? The skill sets vary in those nuances a lot, depending on the size of your team. But again, your core skill sets, communication, advocacy, just keeping things straight, following up on everything, keeping those loose ends tied up, those core principles are what unite production as a discipline. It is the application of those things that varies between team type, size, where your team is located, what kind of devs you have, right? And I know it's like pretty common to say that, you get a veteran team of developers together. There's a lot of startups and stealth startups right now. You get a small team of veteran developers, they don't need a producer. That's not true. Those people just know production work, and they just inherently do production work because their creative process has absorbed a natural pipeline that they can just run blind. It's 10,000 hours, right? They've put their 10,000 hours in, and now they have the pipeline as part of their kind of like drumbeat. The reason producers exist is because not everybody has that, and we are here to kind of like, pump your heart for you and make sure that all those good practices become habits that you take with you for the rest of your career. And maybe someday you don't need us, and that's okay. Someone else will.
So touching on that point of drum beats and just pacing timeline tools that we can help to keep us on track. Laura, how do you approach setting and achieving milestones in your area, in your discipline? Any tools and tactics that you find to be effective?
Yeah, so when projects get signed, we help the teams by setting project milestones based on their own original time estimates, by evaluating and adjusting them in the way that I explained earlier. And usually we also add some buffer time just to be safe if the timeline lets us. And we can then also start looking at real world milestones for the entire title or DLCs or like product. It depends on what's been discussed. So think about things like a preferred release window, or when we'd like to start localizing, when we want to start doing porting, specific showcase events that would work well for the game, some marketing beats, maybe sales requirements, and then based on that, we're going to create a like the milestones that are going to go in the contract eventually. And many publishers have different ways of working, but I've always liked having milestones with very clear deliverables. It makes it clear for both sides what has to be delivered when, and if everything is in order and it gets approved, then the agreed payment is made. It's very straightforward. It's clear for all of the parties that are involved. Everyone knows exactly what they're getting into from the start. And then afterwards, it's just a matter of sticking to that plan as best as possible and trying to steer and adjust when that's no longer possible. And then one thing that we use for this that doesn't get used in many other indie game processes, so it might be nice to point that out, is waterfall planning. So it's basically working out all of the task dependencies for the whole project and seeing when these dependencies for one task are resolved so that the other task can start, and then you sort of make a waterfall. And we mostly see that for the publishing processes that have very hard dependencies based on the milestones. Keeping this updated can help us see if the project is still on track for its release window, even a year or maybe longer upfront. Not always extremely accurate, but good enough that it gives us a window of time to see where we can start doing certain marketing leads, sales window, that kind of stuff. Can be very hard sometimes to fit agile processes into this waterfall overview, but we try to keep that in mind when we make the original milestone planning, hence the buffer time that I mentioned before. But it's a nice tool.
Khmer, I'm curious, what does that look like when you're working with an external dev partner? How do you pinpoint what kind of milestones, deliverables? How do you figure that out?
I think a lot of that goes back to communication with our supervisors to see how things are tracking along. So I work very closely with our outsourcing producer, I've seen that in some companies, they kind of merge what I do and our producer together. So we work together closely to see how we're tracking along with our different, Gantt charts, where we should be hitting certain milestones with our vendors. And because we all have internal estimates for how long we think, armor should take, trophies should take. And if they're starting to slip, that's when we may intervene, because we do have quite large asset bundles that we are producing. And then on the flip side, I am constantly looking after our budget because at any given point, if we're starting to hit into the red, it's like whoop, you got to talk to production right now, because, at the end of the day, we have a pot of money to use. So I always look at that on a daily basis. So it's kind of like that macro versus micro of the role.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I've seen that. I think we're just about to ready to head into our final question that we've designed beforehand. But I've also seen that we've got some questions coming in the live Q&A. So before we dive into this final question, I want to call out that there is still a little bit of time and space to add further questions in if you'd like. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do so: Discord, YouTube, LinkedIn, etc. But with that, Kitty, for the final question that we had thought up beforehand, how do you manage upwards or even outwards to key stakeholders, to publishers, to external partners?
Yeah, so Layla pretty much summed it all up. So managing upwards and outwards is fundamentally about setting clear expectations and maintaining constant communication. Each group has their different needs, and part of my role is tailoring the information properly so that everybody gets exactly what matters to them. So for key stakeholders, it's about giving them an accurate, honest picture of how the project is progressing, what's on track, what's at risk, and what decisions might be coming their way. They want clarity, not surprises, so I make sure that they stay informed with regular updates and concise summaries they can act on. Publishers, on the other hand, care primarily about delivery and alignment. They want confidence that we'll meet the milestones we've committed to, that we signed a contract for, so that any risks are being managed and that we're building what we promised them. So with them, I focus on milestone readiness, timelines, dependencies, and anything that can impact their dates and scope. My job is to reassure them that through transparency, not optimism. So anything that's truthful, we don't want to be lying to them, because that just makes everything terrible, because you don't want to give them surprises. And with external partner, like outsourcing art houses or animation houses, communication becomes more collaborative. They need to know how their work is landing, what is going well, what needs adjustment, and where priorities may be shifting, because internal goals always shift, and we want to communicate that properly and not like tell them, oh, this is your fault, because oftentimes it's not. It's the internal problems that's causing a ripple effect to the other people and departments. So what you want to do is build strong working relationships by giving clear feedback, setting achievable goals, and staying responsive. So you want to respond to them as soon as you can. It's about creating a two-way flow of information so they can do their best work and feel trusted in the process, about setting a good relationship with these vendors, because you never know, they're going to come back. And if it's a good vendor, you're always going to come back, and you, with the word of mouth, you're going to tell so and so, hey, this vendor worked really well with us. And so across all these relationships, the core principle is the same: is setting clear expectations, consistent communication, and the willingness to be direct when something needs attention.
So this actually perfectly segues into the first live Q&A question that we have. And before I read out the question, I actually want some thumbs up and thumbs down. Again, acknowledging that the answer is going to be, it depends. But with regards to things like setting expectations, would you say thumbs up or thumbs down for using RACI? Oh no, I think we're with 4. It depends. That's a lot of sips of hot chocolate, y'all. Okay, who wants to tackle this one? What are your thoughts on the RACI model? Does it hold up with small and or large projects?
I'm just going to lay down a general answer just for the vibe that I'm about to be bringing to the Q&A, which is like, part of your job as a producer is to know your team, and it is also to know all of the tools you have available. First of all, there's 2 different ways to spell RACI. There's RACI, there's RASCI. There's also DACI, DACI. So there's already 3 variations on the RACI chart that you could use. Which one's right for your team? I don't know. It depends on the size. It depends on the types of devs, the way they like to work together. Have they been working together long? Do they like each other? Or is there some work you need to do on the way they need to communicate? How specific do you need to get? How much you need to spell out in terms of their responsibilities? How complicated is your project? These are all the questions we are running in the backs of our heads, just sitting there like, giga computers processing. I always compare myself to, if anyone's read to Martha Wells' Murderbot series, I feel like I am Murderbot. I just constantly have like a bad TV show on this screen in my brain and then calculations on this screen in my brain. And that's what I'm doing constantly. So in terms of, do I like RACI or whatever tool, any specific tool anybody ever asks about, Jira, Chakra, RACI, whatever, doesn't matter. Do I like it? I have no personal opinion on 90% of tools. I have an opinion on whether or not it is effective on the specific team that I am working with at that moment.
I think you gave the best definition.
Yeah,
for
I think you just literally
ever.
ran through. Yeah, you just ran through an entire bag of hot cocoa in 2 sentences. I
am the most annoying pedant to talk to. I'm like this about anything. It's just you can ask me about tea and I'm like, well, it depends.
Any other thoughts to add, or should we move to the next?
So I guess
question?
I actually have the RACI chart up in front of my face right now because I was Googling it really quickly just to make sure that I have my ducks in a row. We actually started using RACI chart when I came back to Blind Squirrel. Previously, we didn't really use it, but now we're using it. And I went through it with the team that I'm currently on right now, and everybody thought it was useful. I never had an artist telling me, okay, this was really good. I was like, okay, so we're doing something good. So it really depends. Like we always say, it really depends on your team and how they work and how they want to work. For me personally, as a producer, I am not a process Nazi, for the lack of a better word. I like to improve my process based on what the team wants to do, how they work. If something is not working for them, I'm going to change it just so that it's easier for them. I don't want people to be doing process just for the sake of process. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, so moving into the next question. How can you find the question behind the question or the root of an issue? I mean, I think we touched on it, Layla touched on it. Is that something that you just have to be born with, or can you learn this?
I've actually seen people learn this, but I think it's a lot harder if it doesn't come to you naturally. Because I've seen people where you sort of help teach them, okay, what are the things that you can ask to get to the root of the problem? But if they don't naturally do that by themselves, you do see them go sort of over that list every single time, where it doesn't really become natural. So do you have to be born with it? Maybe is a little bit exaggerated, but it should come natural to you in some way, or at least you should pick it up naturally in some way once you at least sort of know how to get to it.
I think the innate curiosity that we've been touching on is part of it. You need to want to know more. You have to be curious. You have to want to figure out what's underneath this, what's causing this. Is there a systemic problem? Is this something that we can prevent moving forward? I think just having that general curiosity is going to get you a very long way.
As a painter, one time I was watching really famous DreamWorks artist, or ex-DreamWorks, Nathan Fowkes. I was watching him paint in a demo once, and in like 2 minutes, he laid down what, if you zoom out, it looked like a realistic black and white layout of a painting. And I sat there and I remember going, oh my God, I can't do that. That's crazy. How does he do that? That's natural talent. No, It's just that he has drilled the relationships between the darks and the lights so many times that now when he looks at it, he knows which questions he needs to ask about the thing he's looking at, which ones he doesn't. So I do think it is like just getting your reps in. And if you have to start out from a point where you're like, okay, I talked to my mentor gave me a list of 20 questions I need to run through, and I'm going to run through those 20 questions every single time I'm faced with a problem, that's fine. You're going to get down from 20 to 18 to 15, all the way down until it starts coming faster. It doesn't have to come naturally. I built this personality brick by brick. None of this is coming naturally to me, but you just have to get your reps in. And then I think you will be impressed with your own progress.
But I do think you need the curiosity.
100%.
So I see that we've got other questions coming in, but unfortunately we're running very short on time and we don't want to eat into the time for the next excellent presentation that's coming up. Of course, you are all warmly welcome to come ask more follow-up questions in the game production community Discord. So I didn't check with Jay beforehand if this is okay to even plug this, but ask for forgiveness and whatnot. So discord.gg/gameproduction. Feel free to drop your questions there. I see interesting questions coming up. We have a bunch of folks in the Discord that would happily answer all of these questions there as well. Do be prepared. You're going to get the "it depends" answer a whole lot. So there's more hot chocolate going to be drunk over the course of time. And with that, I once again want to, of course, thank Jay and the IGB crew for allowing us to share our thoughts, for the organizers. And then, of course, my beautiful panelists for sharing their thoughts, their perspectives on what the differences are between the different kinds of producers and what their experiences have been. So with that, thank you all. And let's see what the next session is going to be.